Up.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to go 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to the Bet the Close podcast. I'm AndrewDFS. I'm joined alongside the Bet the Close host, Chris. And we're also joined with RC Fischer, founder of ffmetrics.com, the best scouting projections in the game, best fantasy football advice and handicapping advice you can find in the main street in the hold on. Okay. Sorry, I'm so used to just doing my own. When I mixed in Bet the Close, I couldn't something mixed in.
It doesn't even sound right coming out of your voice. I'm so used to Chris saying it.
Yeah.
I will say, oh, you know what? Shit. Just let's do this again. 3, 2, 1. But it somehow like gets stuck in the podcast and you hear it anyway. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's fine. We can leave that part in. I don't care.
Andrew could not bring himself to say that I was the best scout in the world.
No,
wrote down.
That's not.
I mean,
the part that
really
got
me.
The part that got me is I was like, oh, it's the best in the mainstream. I'm like, well, no, that's the opposite. that's not what we're about. So that's when I got tripped up. I'm all right. I got this, guys. Sorry.
Well, technically, it is the best in the mainstream.
Yeah, technically.
Right.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody. This is a podcast talking about the wild card round weekend. I'm joined along with the Bet the Close host, Chris Bilello, and the owner of ffmetrics.com, RC Fischer, with the best scouting projections in the game, fantasy football advice, and handicapping commentary. Go to ffmetrics.com. And I'm Andrew DFS. RC, Chris, let the audience know what we're going to be talking about today.
We're going to be talking about trying to make some money on this playoff weekend with key betting and key props. I better get some good ideas from you guys.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's take on the games, futures, whatnot. But, a lot of things, before we dive into that, a lot of things has been going on in the NFL coaching circle. We've been seeing a lot of firings happening lately, a lot of surprises. Chris, anyone catch you off guard this week?
Well, I think I'd be the only one that was really surprised that the Patriots would get rid of Belichick. I think he'll be coaching next year. I just kind of see that situation as you got to find a quarterback before you can tell if your coach has really fallen off. But I was talking to a buddy of mine and who said before the Jets game, he's definitely gone. And sure enough, he was. I guess I probably shouldn't have been as surprised as I was about Vrabel, but that one surprised me. I don't think I was up on who was out, except I pretty much could tell you that Arthur Smith was going and Ron Rivera. The other guy surprised me, and then Pete Carroll was out of nowhere to me.
Yeah,
and that was a kind of out of left field too. So I didn't expect to see. There's always action on that Monday and the days following with the coaching turnover, but it was interesting this year. It's that anywhere from 1 to 4 year guy that clearly didn't work out, but this year felt a little different.
Yeah, Pete Carroll was definitely a shock to me, but I think the most shocking was probably Nick Saban retiring. I know that has nothing to do with the NFL, but that still really caught me off guard too. But anyways, let's dive into the wild card games. That's what everybody's listening and hoping to hear more about. The first game on the slate are the Cleveland Browns taking on the Houston Texans. Cleveland is currently a 2-point road favorite, and the over-under here is 44.5. RC, you want to kick us off with your thoughts on this game?
I am not strong on either side of this, but I am going with Houston and taking the 2 points, and I'm getting more convinced about that. I mean, not with a bunch of conviction, but with every injury report that comes out with Denzel Ward potentially being out now. and Noah Brown potentially being in. The Texans at home in a Stroud versus Flacco battle, where I was looking back over the Flacco run. Man, the Browns turned the ball over a ton. I think the Browns were bottom 5 in turnover differential, and the Texans were top 5. And I know that's that type of stuff straightens out or what have you, but I think it's only accelerated under Flacco, and I just have a feeling the Flacco's carriage is going to turn back into a pumpkin, and the Texans are going to walk away with this one. But I'm not betting any serious money on it.
Chris, how about you? Do you feel the same way?
I'm feeling the same way in that on the show on Bet the Close, there was a team in the AFC and a team in the NFC where I gave out a future before week 18. And in the AFC, it was Cleveland. The number we got was 18-1 or 16-1, depending on if you were limited as to where you were able to shop. And my thought on both them and the Rams, we can talk about later in the NFC, was felt like the odds were big enough to win the conference that you could hedge it if you wanted and still come out with a profit. Because remember, going into last week, we knew Cleveland was already set. And so then I saw they come out as a favorite. So that gives you a great hedging opportunity at plus money. But then the more I thought about it, I kind of am considering even more than I would have on Houston because, as RC said, it was just a gut feel that it was starting to line up in favor of Houston. I think that the one probably most favorable thing for Cleveland is an oldie but goodie with the Jeff Sagarin strength of schedule ratings. And if you guys don't remember this one from years past, you take the teams and only in the wild card round, you look at the strength of schedule and rank them 1 to 32. And if there's 10 or more slots of difference between the teams, there is it's a really good record for the team that played the harder schedule. Specifically, if you have 10 slots or better, those teams are 40-12 against the spread.
Wow.
So it's something that's been tracked for years and really strong numbers for it. So Cleveland had the 6th strength of schedule this year, and Houston had the 27th. And that's the biggest gap of wild card weekend. But I'm also Stroud has been awesome. When the teams played a few weeks ago, he wasn't there. And so I kind of feel like Houston seems like a team that could win this round and or next round. So that's the one thing I feel like if Houston does win and knock out the futures bet, well, I'll have it hedged for slightly plus money. But if Houston goes to the next round, they're going to be an 8.5 point underdog and they're going to lose by 20.
Can I jump in something on that schedule?
Go ahead, RC.
Comment. I was looking back over the Cleveland schedule for a playoff preview report that I'm putting out tomorrow. I wanted to do this show to see what new ideas came up to finish it off. But as I was researching Cleveland, and they do have a better schedule, strength of schedule, and all that than Houston. But when you look back through the Cleveland season with a fine-tooth comb, there's a lot of false, fake moments in there of quality victories. They started off the season throttling the Bengals when we didn't know that Joe Burrow had the calf issue so bad at that point. Then they end up beating the 49ers a few weeks later. If you remember that game in the rain that Purdy was actually had a concussion. And they still almost came back and Moody missed a chippy field goal and cost them the game. Later in the season, they caught there was another fake win that they had in there. Oh, when they caught the Arizona Cardinals, it was when the Cardinals had traded Dobbs and they were having Clayton Tune do his debut start. When they caught
Houston without Stroud.
That was the other one. They caught Houston without Stroud, and then they played the Bengals at the end of the season in a meaningless game. But they had 2 Bengals, 2 Steelers, 2 Ravens games in there that all teams that ended up with pretty decent records to help pump up their schedule rating. But I think within their season, they've got a lot of fake wins. And I was theorizing that had Houston had Stroud, and then Houston beat them in that game in Week 16, what would the spread be of this game if Stroud was there and Houston won that game? Houston would be a favorite and wouldn't be getting the 2 points. So, and Houston went with Case Keenum in that game, not even Davis Mills. So I see a lot of fake wins for Cleveland on their schedule this year. They're good. It wouldn't shock me if they won this game, but Flacco is really flirting with a lot of turnovers. He has looked good, but he has turned the ball over a lot and had a lot of near miss turnovers. And he got over big on teams that had banged up secondaries, and his Jets game where he almost had 300 yards in the first half. There was quite a bit of good luck in that, and then they just completely shut him down, and he had like 19 yards passing in the second half. I think there's the Flacco problem is going to catch up with Cleveland at some point. I'm going to bet that it's going to start and end here.
Yeah, RC, all valid points, and I think between the 3 of us, the one thing we're going to have in common about this particular game is just not being confident about it. But other than that, for me, I'm leaning on the Browns here. I don't feel great about it, but the fact that you have Houston with a rookie head coach, rookie quarterback in the playoffs, that sort of concerns me. And you're going up against not only a quarterback with Super Bowl experience, but you also have a DC and Jim Schwartz that can really devise a good game plan to get after a rookie quarterback. We've seen Stroud in certain situations get uncomfortable, and mind you, at home he's been great, but there were games against Carolina when there were certain defensive schemes. I think it was cover 0, tight man or something like that was throwing him off. But not having Denzel Ward really hurts Cleveland's case here. I still like them. I think that Cleveland's going to pull through at the end of the day. But one more stat I'm going to leave you guys with is that if a team hasn't made the playoffs and they're hosting a home playoff game, since 2011, those teams have been covering the spread 30 to 49 against the spread. That's good for 38%. So Houston falls into that category, and so does Detroit. Does that speak to you guys at all, or are you still comfortable saying that Stroud is this wizard that's going to debunk a trend like that or any other trend with rookie quarterbacks playing in their first playoff game?
Well, I think that Brown comes back. I mean, I think that Stroud I see it as a close game that we might see. It's kind of a coin toss situation. I don't see either one of these teams dominating the other. Cleveland's defense hasn't been great on the road specifically. You mentioned the quarterbacks in their playoff debut, or rookies, or just any quarterback in their playoff debut versus one with playoff experience, 17, 31, and 1. So you have the trends, that are on the side of Cleveland. But I guess at a high level, I feel about this game depends on the side of Cleveland. I think about the 2 teams and the way that they match up. My gut does say Houston.
Yeah. I mean, this one I feel like is a toss-up, so no strong feelings I don't think anybody here is going to call this one their best bet, but
No.
I think we're ready to, unless there are any props you guys want to share with the audience regarding this game, I think we're good to move on to the next one.
Just one that I put out was a couple days ago. The Jerome Ford 16.5 yards receiving. I think it's up to 17.5 now. He has had quite the season as a receiver, maybe a better season as a receiver than as a runner. And 17, to him to get 17 yards, he's done that quite often this season. And in his last 2 games, he's hit that number. 4 out of his last 6, he's hit that number. One of the time he missed, he didn't really play that much. I think he had a mild injury. So that's the only prop I've seen that jumped out at me from this game.
I like
Andrew,
the Jerome.
You didn't like my prop that I threw out there with Nico Collins.
Nico Collins, what's the number? I remember the number being pretty high.
I don't recall the number, and Chris, reason for that, I felt like even Cleveland, even if Ward's out, Cleveland's second and third corner, one of them is Newsome. Marcy can probably tell you the third corner's name. They're still pretty good. I think they could not shut him down, but I think they could, make him go under his receiving total.
I think Newsome will cover the slot receiver. I don't think he'll cover Nico Collins in this. And they're still pretty good otherwise. But this is Stroud.
With Stroud has been awesome. And I just think the Browns defense at a high level, they have not been good on the road. They've been good at home when they're aided by the weather. So I think that you're kind of running out of weapons as far as, who Stroud can spread the ball out to. But I did hear a case made, and a couple of people made, as I was listening to the podcast, made the over in this game the best bet. So I'll just say generally, if you're playing overs in props, at least it would be in line with a couple of people's expectation for this game. I think early on, when you have a team, even though it's indoors, when you have a team with a rookie quarterback, I wouldn't necessarily expect both teams to come out flying on offense. So I think you have an opportunity in this game, if it starts slow and you do buy that it's going to, the over, if you're betting in game, you could potentially, if it starts slow, you're going to have a crack at a lower number when you're betting the total. So I heard a case made for Njoku over 5.5 receptions. And like I said, I like the Nico Collins because he's the guy that gets the big chunk plays.
Yeah. And just for the audience, I saw a stat indicating that unders, I think since 2013 in the playoffs, have been covering at a 60% clip. So I don't know if I feel really strongly about the over under here, but something tells me, just given how many points are piled up by Cleveland last time, I could see this being a lower scoring game, but I don't have a good read on it.
I know just to really wrap this up, this question will be for Chris because I know where Andrew's going to be on it. Chris, if this was at Cleveland with this cold front, and the spread was the same, would you be playing Cleveland?
Oh yeah, with both fists.
That's what I would. I think that's the difference in this game for me is Houston at home on the fast track leads into Stroud. If this was at Cleveland, it would be an anti-Stroud just because of the weather, and I would go with Cleveland.
Yeah, 100%. The bet would that would probably be a best bet if it was -2 Cleveland in Cleveland, honestly. But okay, I think that's a good segue. Speaking of bad weather, this next game is Miami going into KC for one of the coldest NFL playoff games in history. I think it's going to get down with wind chill to below -10. So you have a team in the Dolphins that's from a warm weather state traveling into KC. Tua, I don't think has ever played in a game like below 40 degrees. I think I saw a stat like that out there. So the line is Miami is a 4.5 point road dog, and the over unders 43.5. The first thing that jumps out at me is the cold weather is probably going to stymie the Dolphins offense, and the Chiefs offense is just stymied itself. That 43.5 seems a little heavy to me. I think this is probably going to go under. What do you guys think?
I think it has to. I mean, this is going to be a miserable game between two miserable fake good teams that have been struggling on offense, and both with decent defenses. Chiefs with a pretty good defense. Throw in the cold and all of that. I think this is going to be an eyesore to watch. It almost makes me want to take the points, but I'm going with Kansas City just because I can't believe Miami is going to be prepared for this weather like Kansas City would be.
Chris, what about you?
I don't really feel like, I think wind is the biggest thing for unders in these games. And, most fields are heated. Kansas City's field is heated. So, yeah, it's going to be cold. But I don't know. I mean, I think that the catalyst for the under would be specifically that these two offenses can't get out of their own way. That's, I wouldn't rely so much on the cold like Buffalo and Pittsburgh. I think that's an under that you can really count on the weather aiding you because of that's lake effect, and that's over 20 miles per hour and gusts of 40 to 50. This is just, I guess, also just unbelievably cold, and the ball is like a stone. That probably, I guess, could help as well.
But then the field heaters then make it kind of super moist and slick, and they already have enough problems catching passes in Kansas City. Now you're going to have a frozen brick ball that's slippery.
Yeah, my thought on this, and you guys know that as soon as, usually I don't like to look at the lines, and I like to guess them and use that week to week as something that gives me perspective as I'm analyzing the point spread throughout the week. But I was looking at my phone as the lines started popping up, and this one surprised me when it was only Kansas City -3. At that time, weather wasn't even really on my mind. It just Kansas City at home. These two they played on a neutral field, and Kansas City I think was -3 or 3.5. So to be 3 at home, I know they're not playing as well, but you've got Tua, first-time playoff starter, against Mahomes, who's obviously got a lot of playoff experience and success at home. And my thought on Miami right now, as the week has gone on, so just initially looking at that 3 and thinking it was too low, and I thought it should be 3.5, and turns out the market, well, things are happening, but the market's got it even higher than that at this point.
Yeah, 4.5 now.
Yeah, up to 4.5, right? So it's one-way money on Kansas City. I don't disagree with it. The way I see this game with the cold, the biggest impact is you have Waddle and Hill both injured. So if it's that cold, what's the chance that one of them goes out of the game at some point, or maybe both of them go out of the game at some point? And Kansas City, or sorry, rather Miami, they made that one trip to Baltimore for a couple of days or an overnight, but they've been in South Beach for a month. So as much as 0 degree with wind chill would hit just any normal human being, it's got just, it has to impact you more when your body's acclimated to that climate.
Tua's 3-8 against the spread, going on the road against winning teams as well. So I mean, we've seen this. I think Miami's only beat one team that's had a record over 500 all year, that being Dallas. So that concerns me. But Chris, you're talking about the injuries to the receivers. Waddle is obviously, like, we don't know if he's going to play. Hill looks like, he was pulling himself in and out of series, I think, against Buffalo. But what about the injuries to the defense. So Jerome Baker out, Andrew Van Ginkel out. Obviously, they had injuries to Chubb, to Jalen Phillips, and they even had to sign these like old-time free agents, Jason Pierre-Paul, Bruce Irvin. Are we concerned that they're not going to be able to stop Casey's like running game? Like, could Pacheco just run through all these like replacement level defenders and control the game like that? And especially Casey's really strong defense. That's where my mind's going with this game.
Well, I certainly think that is the case. And in fact, Buffalo went up and down the field on them last week. They just kept turning the ball over. That game was closer than, or see, you can tell us as, watching it back and, in the detail that you see it. But I think that Miami, they never really reached the potential that, well, I guess for a game or two, they reached what we thought they might be with Fangio. And then once Jalen Phillips went out, it was a slow, lose a player or two every week. And they just, hit that potential for a game or two. And then this is just not a Fangio defense that, where you'd think and be scared of it. I'm not scared at all of Miami's defense. And, Andrew, I think from my perspective, you hit it on the head with if you're worried about Mahomes and his lack of receivers, worry about it next round because Pacheco can get him there himself.
Yeah, well said. And one other note to add, KC pretty much had a bye week last week. They rested Mahomes. They rested Kelsey. They played the Chargers. I think they might have rested some other key people as well. And then Miami had the late game, right? And they were in a dogfight for the division. They're kind of deflated. They were supposed to be hosting Buffalo again this week if they won that game. So I don't know if their morale's down or if they're going to come out flat in this. I don't think they will, but I could see this being I loved it at 3. I'll still bet Casey at -4.5, but I'm obviously less comfortable here.
Also,
And
among the defensive injuries, there's also Xavier Howard out. Not that this is going to be a big passing affair, but the only hope that this defense has had all year is when Ramsey and Howard have been on the field at the same time against weaker offenses. Other than that, this may be one of the worst defensive units, one of the worst performances, one of the worst schemes by a supposed defensive genius that I've seen this year. And now they're all hurt. Now they got half their guys out.
Yeah. Chris, were you going to add something too?
Well, I was just thinking about the Sagarin strength of schedule stuff because it's so strong in the wild card round. This game didn't qualify for the 10 spot difference, but it's 9 spots, so it just missed by 1. And the strength of schedule for Miami, according to Sagarin, came in at 28, and Kansas City was 19. So by 1 spot, it missed Kansas City falling into that trend that we talked about earlier. But it is, as we said, the playoff debut quarterback versus obviously one really experienced. So when I think about this game and the brackets of the playoffs, I would be floored if Miami was going to the next round, and I wouldn't blink if I checked my phone and Kansas City was going to go to the next round. And that's exactly how I'm going to find out the result of this game because I'm not ordering Peacock.
Yeah, that's an interesting twist. So for those of you that don't know, apparently this game's not going to be available on cable. You're going to have to buy the Peacock app or whatever and subscribe to that to watch this game. Unlike Chris, I'm probably going to be a sucker and pay for that because I want to watch that comfortably in my own home. But I don't blame you at all, Chris. This is kind of messed up.
I got the year-long, at the end of each year when it comes up to Christmas time, they always throw out a special for Peacock and other channels, but Peacock especially. And 2 years ago, I got it for $1 a month for the year. This year, they offered $19.95 for the year. So knowing that this was going to happen and it's going to happen again next year, I jumped on it and have been binge watching Suits, and now I'll be ready for the playoffs tomorrow.
There you go.
So it's
Smart.
It's your fault, RC. I was gonna not do it, and then they had to stop. But if you keep giving them $1 a month and others like you, then I guess I'm gonna get dragged along.
Yeah.
You're probably gonna have to pay a rich man's $5.99 or something to get it for a month.
One more thing we didn't talk about in this, Raheem Mostert's also, like, we don't know if he's playing. I don't know if he's been practicing fully or just on a limited basis. But RC, does this, like, is Mostert playing in a game like this? Because he's more of like the, power runner, I would say, in Miami compared to Devon Achane. Even though Achane's electric, do you think Mostert's really important for them to have out there, or do you think Achane can handle like a really tough workload in the cold?
I think if there's any chance that Miami wins this game, it's because Mostert can't play and they're forced to go with Achane.
Wow.
And he somehow puts the team on his shoulders because Tua's not going to.
Wow.
And I don't know that Achane will, but I think that's their only hope.
So
with it being so cold and it's going to be slippery when the field heaters create that moisture on the field, it really neutralizes a very finesse team offense. So, but Achane's the only thing that I think could make a difference.
Achane, certainly electric. I think he played ball in Florida, college ball in Florida. So he also probably hasn't played in a game this cold either. But like RC said, he is pretty freaking electric. So I wouldn't be surprised at that result at all if it was Achane being the driving force behind like a Miami upset. Before we wrap this game up, guys, any props you want to lay out? It sounds like we're all behind Kansas City -4.5, and it seems like we're all on the under 43.5. Any objections to that? Any props you want to add into that mix?
I have two. One that I played that I'm regretting, but I only played the bare minimum because with this game being so cold, nothing's going to be normal. So any trends from the recent is a waste trying to apply it to this game. But I did bet Trent McDuffie to get over 4.5 tackles. He's one of the best tackling corners in the game. And I'm sure Miami's going to do a lot of short game stuff, obviously, in the weather, but I didn't know it was going to get this bad. So he might still get there. But the one I would love to take, but I don't see listed anywhere normal, is if I'm Miami in this game and Tyreek Hill, is normal, I'm having Tyreek Hill take 5 to 10 carries in this game, especially if Mostert is out. But they never seem to use him in the run game. So if this game for me, I mean, Mike McDaniel needs to do something left-handed in this game to try to win it. And if he doesn't, if he just does his typical Raheem Mostert run game and tries to do the Tua short passing game, that's not going to work here. I'm going to have a falling out with Mike McDaniel. He needs to do something creative in this game to win it. And I think Tyreek Hill as a runner, because it's going to be hard to get him the ball otherwise in this weather. And this is against the Chiefs, so Hill's going to give it all he's got.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any props for Tyreek Hill rushing yet.
And we've seen Mike McDaniel come out and impress in the playoffs too. I mean, last year with Skylar Thompson, he almost got the upset in Buffalo.
Yep. So I'm hoping he does that, but I'm guessing he will do his typical Raheem Mostert.
Yep. So We didn't talk about this, but this is a revenge game with Hill going into KC. Obviously, they met up earlier this year in Germany, but I think this one's going to have an additional twist with Tyreek Hill going back to this home that he started off in. So it'll be cool to just see that storyline, see how he interacts with the fans and the game, whatnot. So that'll be pretty cool to see. So I think we're safe moving on to the next game, which is Sunday morning, 1 p.m. Eastern. The Pittsburgh Steelers are taking on the Buffalo Bills in what will be another bad weather game. I think I saw a stat or just an article mentioned that this game might have wind gusts up to 47 miles per hour or something crazy like that. I guess it's that like lake weather or whatever blowing in, but there's also a chance that the storm passes through and the game might have okay weather as well. So it's kind of hard to tell, but what they're projecting now is some crazy winds. So here are the Vegas lines. Steelers are 10-point road dogs, and the over-under is really low. Actually, a really low game with considering that Buffalo's in there, and it's at 35. So that's interesting to me. The one stat I'll throw out before I punt this over to Chris for his thoughts are double-digit dogs since 2011 are 4-11 against the spread. So when you have a double-digit favorite in the playoffs, they usually cover at a pretty high clip. So especially in the wild card round. Chris, what are your thoughts on this game? Where are you leaning?
I say when this one first came out, it was 7.5, and I get the sense from both of you guys that you thought that was low. I understand that Pittsburgh is not going to have Watt, and that's that's a pretty significant loss, but it's just gone straight up all the way to 10, and that storm that's coming, or the system that's going to be going on. My understanding is it's lake effect snow, so it could go all day, and that's what they're predicting for it to go all day. It's in Buffalo, what's so weird is it's not even like a system that comes through. It keeps coming off the lake, and that's why they can get 3 feet of snow, because it just spins over the. And what I heard someone say this week is, don't put in the weather for Buffalo. Put in the weather if you want to look for Orchard Park, because it's different. That's where you get the serious lake effect snow. It's crosswind, oftentimes at the stadium, so that it just gets absolutely brutal. If no one can, so if it's not like a dome team or a warm weather team coming in to play in this game. Pittsburgh plays in lousy weather a decent amount. They're pretty good in it. I guess I really don't get why this game is 10 points. Buffalo got the 2 seed, but they were a couple plays away, in a game away from being a 6 seed. Do you think of Buffalo any different because they're the 2 seed versus 6 seed? I think people do, but they're the same team. And obviously getting a home game is good, but if you're going to really maximize the home field of being in Buffalo, I would say probably the worst team among the AFC teams to come in would be Pittsburgh, because they are tough. And we don't love Najee Harris, but he ran the ball 30 times last week because that's what they can do in this weather. And RC, you can give your scouting report, but I think Pittsburgh's offensive line has been playing really well. So if you take away Josh Allen throwing, because the wind is so, it is so significant. And Pittsburgh, I think they're a pretty elite defense against the run when they have Cam Hayward. Remember, when he was out was when their run defense kind of fell apart, but he's back. So I would give Pittsburgh a chance in this game. Actually, I don't completely write them off as a team that can't go on to the next round here.
Wow. RC, how do you feel about that? You think Pittsburgh's got a shot to upset them?
I'm in the complete opposite camp. I mean, the weather can certainly pull them into upset range. So as a bettor, I get taking the points with Pittsburgh for the weather, but my instincts are telling me that if it's windy there, it's not going to be a constant tornado. There'll be some gusts, but it won't be so overdone that it destroys everything. But then you have Josh Allen, who probably has the strongest arm outside of Will Levis in the passing game. And when he's had to deal with wind issues in the past, he cuts right through it, where Mason Rudolph probably has the weakest arm of any quarterback in the NFL, certainly that's going to start in these playoffs. He's the one that's going to be at risk. He's not going to be able to complete a pass that's not a bubble screen, where Allen can probably run a lot of his normal stuff. So I think there's an advantage to Buffalo there. Buffalo is white hot, getting injured guys back on defense, winners of however many in a row, 5 in a row, a lot of quality wins. Their losses were close losses in games they could have won. I haven't seen a Steelers game yet this year where I walked away and went, oh, the Steelers are the better team. I mean, they could barely beat the Ravens B team last week in a must-win game in the rain. I'm so anti-Steelers, I can't see straight, and that hasn't been a good place to be this season because they always find a way to win these damn games. So I would say the best bet is don't listen to me about the Steelers.
Yeah, and it's funny because now you didn't like them now, and they don't even have their best defensive player out there, TJ Watt. One other thing that I'll mention, you were talking about Flacco potentially regressing back to the mean. He was doing going crazy towards the end of the season, having these crazy statistical outputs, couple 300-yard passing games, I think one 400-yard passing game, whatever. Rudolph, since he's been inserted in the starting lineup, his statistical output looks good, but he doesn't really look that good when you watch him closely. I think that he's a candidate to really regress here too in this bad weather. The one thing here that I'm looking at is Buffalo's QB, Josh Allen, has the ability to rush as well. Like, he's a great scrambling quarterback, and I think that's really important in a game like this. Whereas Mason Rudolph, RC, you would know this better. To me, he doesn't seem like he has that kind of athletic ability, but maybe I haven't watched him closely enough.
No, he doesn't.
I think
that's close.
I think that helps too. Chris.
Yeah, and I think that, all the things you guys are saying, I agree with. If the game goes to plan, Buffalo's the better team. Josh Allen is the multifaceted weapon who can run or pass, and obviously he's got the arm that, if it is, mild or less wind than the extreme forecast, yes, he's got the arm to do it. My thought was Mason Rudolph, they're not going to have him throw the ball because of what RC said. He's incapable. They're going to be running the ball, and their offensive line, which is, I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that. If the offensive line can hold their own and in the running game, my thought was if you just get into a game where there's no scoring, then you could get a punt return or something crazy could happen, and that could have Pittsburgh live to win the game. Not necessarily just a pick of, Pittsburgh as an outright winner as a 10-point underdog, because I don't love Pittsburgh either. But I just look at Buffalo and say, yeah, I appreciate the run that they've gone on, but they're the most people that don't believe in the Ravens. All the money has gone on Buffalo to win the AFC.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not I feel like their popularity has outpaced their actual play on the field. They beat New England, they beat the Chargers, and the New England win was probably bigger than it looked on the scoreboard because the Patriots took that kickback. But they've been okay, but I'm not ready to say Buffalo's dominant. If we get Buffalo and Kansas City in the next round, I would take Buffalo. So I do like the Bills. I'm
Same.
just saying, if the weather makes this a game with no scoring, then all you need is something crazy like a kick return.
So for me, if you look back at their last 3 games, Steelers, right? Like they played the Bengals, who I think they were missing DJ Reader, and they dominated them on the ground. They had a really good Najee, and I think Jalen both had a really good day. But then the game after that, they played Seattle, and everybody runs the ball on them. Like they don't have a great run D. And obviously last week they were playing the Baltimore junior varsity team. And
But Wayne, Seattle countered by starting Devin Bush in middle linebacker for the first time all season to try to stop the Steelers.
didn't
And
Najee have like 3 touchdowns that game?
I
He went
think the
crazy.
Steelers had their best rushing game of the year in that one.
Yeah, but it's funny because then if you look back before those last 3 games, 3 games prior to that, they were on a 3-game losing streak and they couldn't run the ball at all when they went into Indianapolis, and Indy has a pretty like weak run D. So like that kind of is a red flag to me. So I don't know if it's the Steelers' schedule these past 3 games where they've been playing like they've been just in good spots against these teams, but yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Najee, but in weather like this, just any plotter is obviously like gonna have some upside.
You mentioned the
Okay.
schedule, the short-term schedule, but those Sagarin schedule ratings I have here too for this game, and Buffalo's got the 23 Sagarin strength of schedule. Pittsburgh's actually got the 3rd. So if you're looking
Ooh,
at those 10 spots, it actually favors Pittsburgh in this case.
wow, that's a good one. Yeah, that that's a pretty big delta
I
right
mean,
there between.
so much of it, though, byproduct of the division, as it always is. So it fits into the Sagarin thing, but you just look at Pittsburgh's division and look at Buffalo's division, and that gives you the strength of
Yeah,
schedule answer right there. But that's always the case. Your division always has a disproportionate impact on the strength of schedule, but yet it's still been predictive over the last 15 years.
how do you guys feel about the over under on this 35? Do you think that's? Yeah, I know weather's going to be a big factor in this, but are we going to get a game like we got when I think the Patriots went into Buffalo like 2 or 3 years ago and Mac Jones threw only like 3 passes? Do you guys think that this game's going to resemble that one?
It depends on the weather. If the weather is, if it's the bad version, if the bad um, case of the forecast plays out, where it's that brutal crosswind, I think that's the game we're getting. And that's where I was thinking, okay, 10 points with a team that plays outdoors and a game where you can't pass the ball. It really evens out Mason Rudolph and Josh Allen, because neither one of them's passing. If that's the case, the extreme, it's going to have to be a more mild forecast for it not to be that.
Yeah, and for the audience, for those of you that might have forgotten, it's been 2 years, but the Patriots went into Buffalo in what is seeming like similar weather back in December of 2021. Mac Jones only threw 3 passes. New England just ran the ball all day, and the Patriots ended up beating the Bills 14-10. Obviously, that's a classic like Coach Belichick, like coming up with a crazy radical game plan of only throwing the ball 3 times. I could see Tomlin doing the same thing with Rudolph and just saying, hey, we're running all day. We're not going to turn the ball over. We're just going to try to, control the game that way. So I think this is one where we monitor it. If the weather is really that bad, if we're getting into 40 miles per hour, 50 mile per hour winds, it's not so much that you love the Steelers at +10. It's more that 10 points is a lot in a game that is going to have some really crazy weather. But if we're seeing the weather, if we take the weather out of it, or if for some reason like the forecasts are wrong, I can really get behind backing this Bills here.
And in that game back in 2021, Josh Allen did throw the ball 30 times, only completed 15, touchdown, no picks. But I remember watching that game, and they tried to run it at each other. In the first half, they kept the ball away from Buffalo most of that game. But in the second half, they had to start gunning it. And with the weather being that bad, Josh Allen looked pretty good. I think they walked away from that thinking, why didn't we just start out throwing? Why were we scared of this weather? So I had that game in my memory banks as Josh Allen cutting through the wind and the snow where Mac Jones just couldn't. The couple times he did throw, it looked terrible.
Yeah, that's a good point. And maybe them having that game under their belt, obviously a lot of the same team was there. Josh Allen was the QB, McDermott the coach. So maybe they're going to look back at that game and say, hey, let's get Allen involved. Let's not just try to run the ball up the Steelers' throat or anything like that.
The smart betting thing to do is to take the Steelers and the points, hoping for the bad weather. But even if there isn't, that's a lot of points. I just hate the Steelers so much that my judgment is clouded.
Yeah.
Well, RC, the in the wild card round, home favorites of 8.5 or less, 33% against the spread. But when you get that spread over 8.5, they're 10-1 against the spread. So that's in favor of Buffalo, and it kind of.
But I bet all those games were played in better conditions than this.
Yeah, you kind of have to throw it
thing.
out. In situations like this, you kind of throw out trends and models, right? Because it's just crazy weather. You go with your gut.
Well, I mean, I would say that the weather is known, and in most cases, you can say, okay, you've got a home favorite of 8.5 or 9 or more, and the variables are known. This weather is known, and the spread is still bettable right now at 10. So I think without the weather, would the spread be 10? I wonder, or would it be higher?
Yeah, that's a fair point. What about props, guys? Are we feeling anything here? I mean,
I had a thought that I'm interested in hearing what you guys have to say about it, because we know that Pickens is kind of the deep receiver, although he has taken some short passes a long way. But my thought was kind of under on Pickens. It's 40.5, and you guys were mentioning that Rudolph, with not a strong arm. So what do you think about Pickens? I think Deontay Johnson would get the volume, and I kind of feel good about an under on. Yes, it's an explosive receiver, but the Bills know that, and you've got a weak arm quarterback in a windstorm.
I don't hate that. I could get behind it. I like under on him. I like the under on the passing attempts for Rudolph as well. I don't think they're gonna let him throw the ball much.
I would advise against it of playing the prop, just because the one thing that Mason Rudolph does that Pickett and Trubisky and Roethlisberger, I don't know if Roethlisberger was with Pickens or not, but the one thing that they don't do that Rudolph does is he'll throw blindly to Pickens and usually throw blindly to him deep. And it only takes one play for Pickens. It's like Nick Mullins with Justin Jefferson. It's like, yeah, it's ugly, but then all of a sudden you look up and he's got 400 yards passing, and Jefferson's got 100+ yards receiving. Their little win streak and Mason Rudolph's decent numbers have come from just floated out prayers to Pickens, and when they land, it's huge. And the guy's so good that I'd be afraid that will be their passing game. They're not even going to be able to have a passing game otherwise, especially if they get down. If they get down in this game by a couple of scores and Rudolph has to throw, he's going to throw deep to Pickens. He may not connect any of them, but he's going to try. The other guys don't even try.
Yeah, it seems like the bet has already been attacked. At least I'm looking at FanDuel. The Deontay Johnson and Pickens both have 3.5 as their reception numbers. Deontay Johnson's about even juice on the over and under 3.5, but George Pickens is the under 3.5 is minus 166. So I think the bet was on receptions, and they're guarding against what you're describing, RC. Go ahead and hit a deep ball if you want, but he's not catching 4 passes.
Yeah, like it wouldn't surprise me if, like last week, in a must-win game with inclement weather, he had 0 targets. But in the prior games, he had 100+ yards and was the difference.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the way it goes with Pickens. He's just to me, he's too random to bet on or against.
All makes sense.
I would offer up the James Cook under on rushing. If you think this game's going to be rainy and windy and sloppy, he's fumbled the ball 4 times in his last 6 games. Both games, 2 fumbles each. I think he cost them a game with a fumble in recent weeks in the second half of the season. He's not the most secure ball carrier, and if the weather is sloppy, I would think, and he hasn't been doing well for the last 3 weeks. I don't know that he's going to hit his over. I don't think he's going to have a normal rushing game. It's like James Cook had that game against Dallas. It's like the same effect that when Miami scored 70 on Denver, and then everybody just thought Miami, everything was the greatest. And it wasn't. James Cook had that great game against Dallas, and it's like, oh my God, James, he's a Pro Bowler. His season kind of stinks as a rusher outside of that Dallas game with the new OC, without the new OC. And then now you're going to put him in a game where it could be wet and ball control is going to be an issue. And now they're promoting Leonard Fournette and getting him touches. I could see Leonard Fournette getting more touches than, or as many touches as Cook in this game. And Latavius Murray as well. Get the veteran power runners. This is not a game for the 205-pound, not the most ball secure rusher.
This game is designed for a rusher like Leonard Fournette, like Najee Harris. But one of the ones that I'm staring at right now on FanDuel is if you just look at the player rush attempts, Allen's rush attempts are at 8.5. I think he's hit that, I believe, in 4 of the past 6. And this seems like a game that he'll be running the ball himself a lot, lots of scrambles. So I like the over on that 8.5.
Yeah, these are the types of games where he's going to take it over, especially if the passing game is going to be reduced.
Yep.
Yeah,
Chris, where are you gonna go ahead?
Going back to that running back situation, I do like the idea that we're looking at James Cook. His rush attempts are 15.5, and that's being juiced to the over. And the number he's being dealt at FanDuel at least is 65.5. I would feel, I think with the Steelers' rush defense, I feel okay going under 65.5 with Cook. But then the Latavius Murray and the playoff Leonard Fournette idea, isn't that why they got Fournette, to run him in the playoffs?
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll see Cook out there, but to RC's point, you got your 205-pound guy who's been fumbling the ball. He's one fumble away from the under just gets locked in if he gets ripped off the field. I like the under
and he would too.
Attempts and yards.
Yeah. If he fumbles on the first series or second series, he'll be out for maybe a whole half of the game, if not more.
Yeah.
That happened to him. I think in the Chargers game it was. He fumbled twice. Almost cost him the game.
It's a good one, RC.
How I'm just looking here. I don't know if you guys know so before I look it up, but Fournette's activity has gone up. I mean, I think the reason they got him was for games like this. You know, for use him in the playoffs. Even if Fournette gets 8 carries and Murray gets 5, there's not enough.
Basically, Fournette's taken away Murray's touches for the most part.
That's the way it's gone. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
But
it's
I
only
think
been 2 games, right?
the bigger risk here is Cook fumbling and Fournette just coming in and taking over. I think
That's what I mean. That there's a couple of different. I like that there's a couple different avenues that could help us get there on the under on Cook. I mean, if he stays in there the whole game and he's their guy, and I guess that's why I like the yardage better than the attempts. Although you bust a big run, but if you're counting on the Steelers' rush defense, the only thing I can think of that makes it a bit of a risk is you have a 10-point favorite. So at the end of the game, if Buffalo's got the ball, you'd think they were going to be running it, and if it was with
And I don't
Cook,
know that
then
they'll run it with Cook.
well, I don't know. I was just thinking if you're going on an under rushing with the team that's favored,
Yeah.
more likely to win. But I do agree. I mean, that would be okay. This is why we have Murray or Fournette would be the guys, because you're not looking for an explosive play. You're looking for a first down when you're trying to run the clock out.
I think I'm with Chris on I rather play the under on the yards versus the attempts.
Mm-hmm.
And since that new OC came in, guys, I think that the first time the new OC was there was the Jets game. I think back in mid-November. Cook has hit that 15.5 mark. I think if it was 8 games, he's hit it 6 of them. He's only missed it twice since that new OC came in. One of them was last week against Miami. The other one was against Kansas City. So, I mean, that's pretty favorable for him to go over on the attempts, but there's noise with that. He could easily fumble and that's it. And pretty much you'll go on the under. I think what's more of a safer play, like Chris was saying, is going under the yardage there.
His last 3 games, yards per carry, 2.8, 3.0, 3.5. And watching those games, defenses are keying on him when under the new OC. At first they weren't, and he was really the center of the offense. Here lately, all of his targets are going away. His receiving numbers are down. His rushing numbers are down. He had that huge game against Dallas, and it's been all downhill ever since.
Yeah. All good points, guys. Okay, I think we're ready to move into the next game. So what we've been talking about so far, we went through the first 3 games. We talked about the Deshaun Watson Bowl, the Tyreek Hill revenge game. There's no real storyline with the Steelers-Bills. I can't really think of a good headline there, but we get another juicy matchup with the 4:30 game on Sunday. The Green Bay Packers are traveling to take on their former coach, Mike McCarthy, and his new team, the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys are 7-point home favorites. Over under here is 50.5. Jordan Love has been on a tear to end the season. Dak and CD have been the QB and wide receiver that you wanted to pretty much bet on all season. They've been money. Guys, how are we feeling about this? Does Dak's against the spread record in the playoffs, 1-5, concern you at all?
I'm staring at more of the 8-0 at home this year with a bunch of big margin victories and going, do I really want to go against Dallas at home and bet on flaky Jordan Love?
And one thing to keep in mind about that home stretch, when they played decent offenses like Seattle and Detroit, I know they crushed Philadelphia, but Philadelphia was sort of like on a gauntlet schedule, and really they've been on a downward trend for a couple of weeks now. But when you look at that Seattle game and that Detroit game, both teams kept it close with Dallas. So I'm gonna flip that back to you, RC. Is that 8-0 schedule record and their margin of victory? Do you think some of that has to do with the teams they were playing and beating?
Oh, for sure, but they did beat them all, and Philadelphia and that Seattle game. I don't know that Green Bay is. They're not as good as the Eagles were before they started melting down. They're maybe about as good as Seattle.
Yeah, I would say that they're as good as Seattle, maybe not as good as Detroit, so somewhere in the middle there. But keep in mind, in that Eagles game too, I think there were 3 fumbles there. I think Hurts had one, Devontae had one, and A.J. Brown had one. So I don't want to take anything away from Dallas and say they weren't going to win the game, but perhaps they weren't going to cover the spread and the game was going to be a lot closer. Chris, what are your thoughts?
I think that this game seems like there's going to be some points, not just from Dallas, but I think again, when you're thinking about not just the total but props, I don't really see either defense having too much of an advantage over the other offense. And I think I expect Dallas to win, as the point spread suggests, but as far as a side on the spread, I look at Dallas as a favorite. I don't really care that much about, and Green Bay as a team that is not necessarily. We everybody expect that they're not going to go very far in the playoffs, but they're such a young team that I could, you even if you're getting beat in a playoff game, you're playing kind of for the future, and I could see them playing hard when Dallas no longer is, and getting a backdoor cover. So if I was going to pick every game, and I would take the points for that reason with Green Bay, but I don't really have this is definitely not one of my, if I was going to make one bet on the game, it would be the over, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. I like your idea there. I think I'm on the Packers +7 as well, but anything below that 6.5 would make me nervous. I like the fact that you have that touchdown there and getting a backdoor cover. Also, Love has been playing really well, and really this team has nothing to lose here. Like that, no one really even expected them to make it when the season started. I think they started the season 1-5, and they've been on, they've had their ups and downs. I think the first time where they really showed signs of life after that 1-5 start was the Thanksgiving game when they shocked Detroit and pulled off the upset there. So I'm not saying that they'll pull the upset off here. I think that's too big of an ask, but I could see them keeping this game close. But I don't have a read on the over under. I don't know if it's going to, I don't know if I'm as convinced that it's going to go over 50.5. But one thing that helps your case, Chris, I think Jair Alexander today, like he had a freak injury in practice. I don't know if he's going to miss, but he like rolled up his ankle. If he's out, then I don't know that they'll be able to contain CeeDee Lamb. I know they have another corner, Ballantyne, who's really good too, but Lamb's just took his game to a different level this year.
Yeah, I don't love Green Bay's defense. I think Dallas is going to get their points at home. And I just feel like even when Green Bay's offense wasn't playing well, it was still a bunch of 3-and-outs and, 2 or 3 deep touchdowns, like a long touchdown drive. So they had that ability to not flip a switch, but, put together a string together good plays and score points. And then, even if most of the game their offense didn't look good, they still had their moments. So I feel like if Dallas it just strikes me as that mid-afternoon game where they score a lot. It's not none of the things in this game that I bet, but I think I'm going to be looking at props and with the idea that you can play overs in this game because I think they're going to score on each other.
RC, what do you think?
We've talked about 4 games so far that I don't really want to bet because the circumstances are either like with Cleveland, Houston. I respect both of those teams. I could see either one of those teams winning. I have strong feelings about Kansas City would crush Miami but I'm backing off of it because of the weather. Totally changes the any of the scouting perspective I might have. Same thing with Pittsburgh, Buffalo. If under normal conditions, I think Kansas City would crush Miami, and I think Buffalo would crush Pittsburgh. But with the weather, that's all up in the air now. It's not anything I want a part of. And in this game, Green Bay, Dallas, I never know what Jordan Love is going to show up. So I don't want to bet it because I could see Dallas winning this by 30. I could also see Green Bay pulling off the upset. The next 2 games, I have good feelings on, but these first 4, including this one, just too many variables I've seen from these teams, or the weather's coming in and forcing the variables.
Yeah, RC, I think that's a really good point because this one to me has the widest range, like Packers pulling off the upset or Cowboys just blowing them out of the water. I don't think any of the games we previewed has that big of a range. I don't think that I don't think we can apply that same logic elsewhere, but I'm with you. This one's confusing. You don't know if Jordan Love's going to show up and be that same passer that he's been in the past 4 weeks. But another key thing here is we don't know if all of Green Bay's receivers are going to be healthy. I think their main one, Christian Watson, he hasn't been playing for a while. Maybe he's been saving it for this game. But one key injury on the Cowboys side, I think last week, Stephon Gilmore might have dislocated his shoulder. I don't know if he's going to be 100% for this one. So that could be a pretty big loss for them because the strength of that Green Bay offense is they have a lot of really good young receivers there, right?
They do, and Dallas has a fake good defense like the Browns do. So nothing would surprise me in this game.
Yep. So any props that we want to talk about before we move to the next matchup?
One I haven't bet today, or one that I did bet today, but I haven't put it out on the site yet. Jaden Reed over 48.5 receiving yards. He's hit that 3 weeks in a row. You got a dome environment, and you're either going to get if Green Bay is going to win it, it's because Jordan Love is hot, and Jaden Reed is going to get those yards. He's going to get his touches. If Green Bay gets throttled by 20, it means there's going to be a lot of Jordan Love passing in the second half, and Jaden Reed's going to get those yards easily.
Seems like a lot of outs.
Only injury could keep Jaden Reed from it, and he's been practicing in full, so he's as fully healthy as he can be.
Chris, what about you? You have any props you want to give out?
No, there really was nothing that caught my attention as far as props. I was kind of thinking about Jordan Love, where he's 242.5 yards passing, kind of thinking about his passing yards over. But then I was kind of hesitant on that just because first-time starter in the playoffs, you don't know how the coaching staff is going to handle that. Although he throws so many screens to the running backs, that I think they're going to trust him. But I actually think that RC's case for Jaden Reed is probably a better way to play it than just going straight Jordan Love.
And if Christian Watson's back, it doesn't affect Reed. It affects Wicks. It affects Melton. It affects Dobbs. But Reed is completely independent when I'm watching them play. He's his whole own entity.
What about Aaron Jones? We saw James Cook, few weeks back really take advantage of this Dallas defense. Do you think they have a problem stopping the run? Could Aaron Jones get loose in this one?
I think that's a great point. And really, I'm liking Aaron Jones in this game for multiple reasons, but that should have been one of the main ones, and I didn't even really think about it.
And I think A.J. Dillon, I don't know if he's going to be able to go.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and Aaron Jones has been on a tear since A.J. Dillon's been injured.
Yeah. Aaron Jones is very James Cook-like, or vice versa. So that's a good call by you. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so those are the props, folks, and I think we're ready to move on to, I think, the juiciest game this wild card weekend, where we have a game that's littered with storylines left and right. The Los Angeles Rams are going to be traveling into Detroit to take on the Lions. Over under here is 52 points. Lions are favorited by 3. We have the team that traded Jared Goff for Matthew Stafford, and now Stafford's making his return into Detroit. Basically, I think both teams won here. Rams got a Super Bowl. The Lions, had to be incentivized to take on Goff's contract. The Rams needed to give them a couple first-round picks in order for them to accept Goff as part of that deal. But then Goff ended up, performing really well for them and exceeding expectations. And it took a lot for Goff to get to this point. Dan Campbell and the OC Ben Johnson, they did a really good job in building Goff's confidence back up. But I think both quarterbacks here, both teams are going to see red. You have Matthew Stafford, who's never gotten a home playoff, a playoff win for the Lions, right? So why is he going to want Goff to do something that he couldn't do in his entire time there? He couldn't even get the Lions a home playoff game, I don't believe, in Detroit during his 10 plus years there. And then on the flip side, you have Jared Goff, who led the Rams to the Super Bowl and obviously lost to Belichick, right, in 2018. And then the team basically tells him, you know what, you're not good enough. So there's a lot of revenge factor here, and it should be a high-scoring game. For me, this is the one I'm most excited about. RC, who do you have in this one?
My best bet is the Rams. Was happy to get it at 4.5 out of the gates. I know it's down to 3 now. I have thought all season that the Rams were one of the hidden gems of the teams that were starting out slow with a losing record or overlooked. I thought they played the 49ers the best of any team this season in a loss in week 2. When Stafford got hurt, they took on they had some issues, but since Stafford got healthy, they're 7-1 with only an overtime loss to the Ravens, which is a game that they should have won. The Rams could be second half of the season 8-0. I think the Rams are one of the best teams left in this playoff. They're the one team to me that can beat San Francisco. I don't think they will, but if there is, it's the Rams. I think the Rams are the sleeping giant of these playoffs, and they're going to go in and dismantle the Lions, who are playing some of the worst pass defense I've seen in the NFL in the second half of the season. The Rams are not a run-heavy team. They're a spread it out and gun it offense, and that's totally against what Detroit does. Detroit stops the run well, and they get obliterated through the air, and I think that's what's going to happen in this game. And the Rams actually have a pretty decent defense. So if this tries to get into a shootout, I will take Stafford and his receiver group and the hot Rams team in general versus the kind of fake and fading Lions.
Obviously, some strong sentiments from RC in this one. Chris, how are you feeling about this game?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that my NFC futures bet was on the Rams, and I just didn't really understand why the week before, or maybe it was 2 weeks left in the season, they were 30-1 to win the NFC, and then on the Sunday before, I guess it was when they played the Giants, so that was the week 17, so 2 weeks left. On the morning of that game, it jumped to 34, and so I took some more 34-1 to win for the Rams to win the NFC. And the thought behind it was you have a Super Bowl winning quarterback, the defense, good running game, all the things you'd like to see in the playoffs. Great coach, and their number one seed, while they're really good, are a division rival. I kind of feel like the familiarity would potentially, cause at least cause the spread to be tighter. And when I was thinking about the 30 and the 34-1, I was saying at least you could hedge. It's only 3 games. You could, how do you not come away ahead with a good team with that much? So this is one of those games that I was monitoring, and when the spreads popped up, I reached out to both of you guys immediately with an alert that the first number that popped was 5, Rams 5, and as it made its way down to a field goal, the entire way, I thought this anything over a field goal is really fantastic. And even now, I'm looking, not to take the 3 necessarily, but the money line on this game. I think that when you talk about Goff, the idea that he's going to want revenge against the team that gave up on him, but I think they kind of the flip side of that is, who knows Goff better than Sean McVay? And then the question I would ask beyond that is Goff a better quarterback than McVay as a coach? If I had to put my money behind one of them being the best at their craft, McVay, I think, is a better coach than Goff is a quarterback. And not that I'm not against Goff. I'm just saying McVay is the guy who's going to win that battle. And it's not to Goff's advantage that McVay knows his strengths and weaknesses. Not at all. So while it's about the Stafford going back to Detroit and I think the big thing is that 2 big things. One is McVay knows Goff really well, and that's a huge advantage Rams. And the other thing is every Lions game I watch, I'm blanking on the coach's name. He's getting late. Campbell takes some wild risk that he shouldn't, and every now and then it pays off, and everybody is all excited. But enough times it doesn't pay off. So the second that the Rams put a little pressure on Detroit, I think they go for it on a 4th down, and they make it. Okay, they're alive. If they don't, they bury themselves. But if it were the other way around, where Detroit gets a little ahead, I don't think McVay is going to go off the deep end. So, team that can run the ball, play defense, there's a lot of advantages the Rams have in this game, and I think Detroit is living off of what everyone was hoping that they were going to be this year, and that they were early in the year, but they haven't been that late. 2 of their last 3 games were against the Vikings with 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks, and they're just
who threw for 400 yards a game against them.
Yeah, I'm not impressed with the Lions, and I echo what RC said. I think that in some of these cases we talk about a team winning, like Kansas City wins, I'm going to be ready to bet against them next week. There are several examples this week of teams like that, but if the Rams win, I'm not going to be jumping. I'm on the Rams. I don't think they're a team that, if they were to, it would be an upset, right? If they were to upset Detroit, that is not a team that I would want to bet against. I think that my hope is that they could avoid the 49ers for another week and, have that 30 and 34 to 1 in play.
Yeah. The one thing that made me nervous about this, the Rams are a public dog, and normally that would be a bad thing. But in the playoffs, actually, the teams getting the most tickets cover the spread 53% of the time. So they don't have that negative sentiment, a negative like trend that they would in the regular season, a public dog would. But another thing here, we talked about home teams that missed the playoffs the year before. They're 30 and 49 against the spread. Home favorites that missed the playoffs the year before, they're 19 and 40. So that becomes even a stronger case against Detroit. Obviously, the biggest injury news with them was Dan Campbell doing something weird, playing his starters in a meaningless game in Week 18. And basically in that game, Sam Laporta hyperextended his knee, looked pretty bad. At first, there were reports that he played, he had some routes in practice, but then he drew the official did not participate tag. So whatever he did during practice wasn't enough to get that limited participation designation. So I think we can take him as very, very questionable for this game, which will obviously be a huge dent to Detroit. Like RC and Chris were alluding to as well, Detroit's secondary has been really bad, and they let Nick Mullins drop close to 400 yards on them to close the season. And that's not Detroit's junior varsity team. Detroit was trying in that game, and they let Mullins go crazy. So take that with for how you will. But one more note that I'm gonna leave you guys with: playoff teams in the playoffs, whenever you have lines moving from 4.5 to 3.5, the dogs that start becoming that sort of lose the edge. So you know how Rams started 4.5 and now they're down to
dogs.
3. They cover at 70% against the spread in the playoffs. So that's something to consider as well. And I'm with you guys. This is the one that I feel strongest about. I love the Rams here. I loved them when they opened at 4.5, 5. I love them now. I think they're going to win this game. I don't even think that they should be dogs. I think I view this as pick 'em, to be honest with you. So I love that I'm getting 3 here, and I'm going to be betting the money line.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on your line, but I'll also be playing alternate spreads too. I want to see what I can get on the Rams minus 3.5, minus 7.5. Because as I said, once you get Dan Campbell in, go for it at any cost mode. That if you get it, you stay in the game, or you can get you get a lead. But when you start missing those, you fall behind, and it can snowball in the other direction.
Let me throw this quick scenario out, see what your reaction would be. If they were to start this season all over again right now, play the same exact schedules, all these NFC North teams get all their players back healthy, so Kirk Cousins is back. And if all the teams with their current rosters had all their healthy, all the players stayed healthy throughout this fake new 2023 season, I would propose that the Lions may be the worst team in the NFC North right now, with all of the teams at full strength.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I'd be very high on the Vikings with a healthy Kirk Cousins, Addison obviously looking good, Hawkinson good, and Justin Jefferson.
Healthy Byron Murphy, and I mean that defense was coming, and then it got undermined with injuries late. But the Bears are arguably as good a team as there is in that division. To down the stretch, the Vikings could have been with all of their players healthy, and Green Bay's gritty. So I think if we redid this, the Lions wouldn't even make the playoffs, but the Rams would.
And maybe this is the start of something here. Like, what if Ben Johnson leaves in the offseason? What if Aaron Glenn also gets a head coaching job, and all of a sudden you have Dan Campbell without his top two coordinators? We saw how much that impacted Philly. I feel like Dan Campbell really needs to. He doesn't seem like an X's and O guy to me. I don't know that. Like, obviously his game management skills have been under fire. Those 2-point conversions that he went for in Dallas were kind of like mind blowing, but
Could
I
be
don't
like
know.
when Dan Quinn had Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, is Ben Johnson at that level? RC, is he?
I don't know. I'm gonna say he's got to be good because the Lions have had a pretty good offense for 2 years now, and I don't think that's Dan Campbell. So it's either Goff or Ben Johnson.
Yeah. What about the over under here? We're at 52 points. That's a pretty high game total, but I think both you can have both defenses through the air. So Goff can obviously take advantage of them with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Stafford has a trio of weapons between Kupp, Puka, Kyron. Even Demarcus Robinson's been playing good. Do you guys feel like 52's a little too heavy, or are you guys comfortable playing that over?
I don't know that the Lions are going to put up enough points to help it get there. I don't have any strong feelings on it, but this Rams defense coming after their bye week has been pretty strong.
Chris, what about you? Do you think that this could be a shootout, or do you think that this is more of a one-sided game with the Rams? We'll give Chris a moment.
He's on mute.
Oh, he's on mute. So we'll give Chris a moment to think about that. But RC, from just like
I think his mind was blown when you reminded him of all of the Minnesota players that they're missing and that they could have won this division in a fake redo.
Chris, did we get
I'm
you
just
too
glad
excited with that?
I'm just glad that I believe I got to go check the Tankathon website. I think they got themselves in the top 10 in the draft. That's what I was excited about. It's that winning streak in the middle of the year that really hurt my feelings as a Viking fan. We almost got a top 3 pick and a quarterback. Yeah, I don't really want to mess with the over-under in this game because I feel so strong on the Rams. So I feel like I've got, if I had to go over or under, um, I guess I'd probably go over, even though I'd like to, tend to go under. Like I tend to think under in playoff games, but this one, there's such a clear bet that I like. If it loses, it loses. But I'm my best bet of the weekend is the Rams, and I was excited to get on it right away. But I'm going to keep firing on the money line, and as I said, start shopping now for some of the alternate lines because they don't come out early in the week. But I think you could have the Rams by margin because I think you got Stafford and the other RC made a couple of references to the defense, but you've got one of the best. You haven't heard his name mentioned much this year, but you're going to hear it as we get into the playoffs. I have a feeling, Donald's one of the best in the game, and he's surrounded by good talent. So you have they had some good fortune when they went to the Super Bowl along the way, like everybody does. But you've got to battle tested veterans who have Super Bowl rings, and that's a pretty good combo when you have good young talent around it too. So I'm really optimistic on the Rams. I mean, it's a tall order when you get this team playing against San Francisco, but anyone else in the NFC, I'm taking the Rams.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that they might have the rookie of the year right next to Aaron Donald and Kobe Turner. And I think Akila Weatherspoon's playing some of the best cornerback play I've seen this year.
There's another rookie on that line. Is his name Byron Young? Did I get that name right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a super talent. But Turner's really had quite the year.
And I think
But
Aaron
Young's had a
Donald,
good season too.
correct me if I'm wrong, but Aaron Donald's probably like drawing triple coverage, and then it's allowing I meant three O linemen trying to block him, and then you have the other D lineman probably freeing up and having just one offensive lineman, or having maybe even just a chip block from the tight end. So I think Donald's really the key there, just drawing so much attention from the offense, opening up the other defenders. So I have no doubt about I think both both running games will be contained. Detroit's obviously very good at stopping the run. I don't think that they've let any, just from a fantasy perspective, no running back has went over 30 fantasy points in a PPR format against Detroit. Same thing with the Rams. These are two pretty strong running defenses. So if you're going to play props, if you're doing DFS lineups, I think you really want to attack the passing game more. That would involve Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially if Laporta's out, or Puka Nacua on the side of the Rams. RC, do you have a read on Puka over Kupp? Do you favor one over the other?
Puka's clearly who Stafford is looking for primarily. Everyone else is a secondary look. However, I think in this game, if I was going to play a prop, it's lower on Kupp. I would probably take Kupp because I think this is a game where Stafford, you talk about Goff revenge. I think Stafford's going to want to stack a game here, and I don't think he's going to, especially if the Lions try to double Puka, because that's what the trends would tell them to do. I think he'll go away from Puka in a heartbeat and just rack it up with Kupp and Robinson if that's what the Lions give him. And that's what's been happening on and off in games in the second half of the season. If defenses start getting too much onto Puka, he'll go over to Kupp. When they adjust from that, when they see that that's what he's doing, and they adjust, then he adjusts back to Puka.
Yeah. And for those of you into DFS, Demarcus Robinson, third receiver for the Rams, he's been on a tear. He's really cheap on DraftKings, so he can be a cheap DFS play that hits. Chris, what are you, besides taking Rams money line and betting them +3 or whatnot, anything you like here from a prop perspective?
I kind of took these games in the order that they're going to be played. So this one, I obviously had jumped on this side right away. So that when I think about, I was interested to look at, and I'm not fully complete with my research, but the props where most receiving yards in the playoffs. I kind of like Nacua in that he's over 20-1, and it's kind of a sneaky way to play the Rams to have and make a couple of game run in the playoffs here. So if everything goes the way that I think, I mean, you've got a game at Detroit, so I'm thinking the Rams are going to put up some good points, and specifically, as RC said, and you said, Andrew, the run defense is really good with Detroit, so it's going to be a big passing day for the Rams. So you're going to get Nacua potentially out to a good start. I mean, it could be a Kupp. If Kupp gets the yards, then he's got it. But I'm thinking Nacua is off to a good start in that, leading the playoffs in receiving yards. Even if the Rams play 2 games, you still might have a shot at bringing it home with him. Because the guys with the buys are only playing maximum of 3. So that's kind of what I was thinking, but I hadn't really completed everything I need to figure out.
Yeah, all valid points. anything else before we move on to the last game on the slate?
Just I did all the Stafford over props I could. And one side note, a way to play the Rams' march to the Super Bowl, Kyron Williams to be the Super Bowl MVP is only plus 65,000 right now.
Wow, that's insane. I mean,
So RC, you were saying, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You were saying you played alternate overs on Stafford passing yard as well. Is that what you were looking at?
Yeah.
that's a crazy line on Kyron. I mean, if you're playing a Rams like future bet on them making the Super Bowl at 50, I think it's 50-1 right now on FanDuel. Kyron Williams winning MVP. I mean, it's not totally crazy if Rams win that game.
Puka's 50,000.
That's insane. Those are crazy. That's basically 500x, 650x, whatever you put. So it's nuts.
Yeah, but it's tough because even if the Rams get there, there's such a gravitational pull toward
Stafford
getting that award that I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure you're really getting as much as you maybe think. But I'm looking at FanDuel here, and most passing yards in the game between Stafford and Goff, Stafford's only minus 140.
Oh, that's not bad. One other stat, guys, just it supports us taking the Rams, but in games where Kyron Williams has had 15 or more carries this year, Rams have been 8-1 straight up. So I know the Lions have a really good run D, but it just goes to show you like how important Kyron Williams is to this offense. So if they somehow work the pass game to open up the run, I think that'll bode well for the Rams, but really no one has had success on the ground against Detroit. But both Kyron and Jahmyr Gibbs on Detroit's side, even though we have two strong run defenses here, they are pass catching running backs, so I think they're going to be heavily utilized.
When the Lions are down and playing chase, it's Gibbs. When the Lions have the upper hand, it's Montgomery. So if you think that the Rams are going to blow the doors off the Lions right away, it's going to be a Gibbs day from there.
Agreed. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to our last one, where we have the Philadelphia Eagles going into Tampa Bay to take on Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers. The Eagles are 3-point road favorites. Over under here is 43. Biggest storyline here is probably the injuries with this one. We have Baker Mayfield, who's dealing with, I think, a rib injury, an ankle injury. He didn't look right in that Week 18 game in Carolina. I think, they didn't even get a touchdown in that game. It was 9-0. They beat the Panthers with 3 field goals. And on the flip side, the Eagles have been dealing with so many injuries. They've been they've pretty much been pummeled through this. I think Hurts is dealing with a finger injury. AJ Brown injured his knee in that last game against the Giants, which, it was kind of meaningless for Eagles to play because Dallas was beating the bricks off of the Commanders. But obviously Devontae Smith is dealing with an injury as well. We don't know if he's going to play. Swift, I think, is practicing, but has missed at least last week. I forget if he missed the week before. So long story short,
Devonta's practicing in full. He's good.
Okay, so that's good. At least the Eagles are going to have Devontae Smith. But, I mean, for me, the way that I view this, the way that Baker Mayfield looked to me, guys, in that game against Carolina makes me really uncomfortable. As much as I want to back the Bucs here, and because of how bad the Eagles have looked and the Bucs defense, being on the upswing towards the end of the season, they obviously, in the middle of the season, they didn't have Vita Vea. They got him back. They lost Jamel Dean for a while. They didn't have Devin White, and then now they have everybody back. So their defense, I believe, is all good. But then the Eagles defense is so terrible. I want to back the Buccaneers here, but the fact that Mayfield's dealing with that rib injury and an ankle makes me really uncomfortable betting this. So I'm picking Eagles -3, but I'm not comfortable. What do you guys think?
Well, it's not one of my, bets that on this game. So if I've got to pick a side on this game, I would pick the Eagles. Wanted to, obviously I was had my eye on the Buccaneers, but I just don't think that the team's that good. I think the Eagles are coming in here, and I think they're going to get this game. And this is one of those teams that sets up nicely if they do win to go against next week. But the two things I'm going to be looking to bet. Well, one I did bet already. I think no matter what the game script is, I love Rashad White with his rushing and receiving yards. It's 92.5 is what I saw. 91.5 on FanDuel, 92.5 elsewhere. I think that, getting the combo of the Eagles' rush defense hasn't been good. So you get his rushing yards, and if they're behind, you get dump off passing yards. So I kind of love the idea of being able to hit that both ways. And then for the last couple of years, one thing that I've been watching and betting is in these wild card games, and it's only the specific to the wild card round. The first score of the game. Usually there'll be minus odds on a touchdown and plus odds on a field goal. And most years, there's or if you add up, go back 15 years, you've actually got more games where the first score is a field goal than touchdown. So the plus odds thing happens more often than the negative odds. So it's completely backwards. So this game being the last one, and I parsed it last year, and it's more likely to happen the first score field goal when it's an outdoor game versus in a dome. So with this being an outdoor game, I'm going to be taking, inventory of the first scores of all the other wild card games, and if we are, 3-2 touchdowns at that point, and then I would bet the field goal, first score to be a field goal in this game. So you have the idea, you have a couple of games to get a sample size, but outdoor game, I know kind of worries me what you were saying about the defenses, but I think that that's one that I'll probably play in this game with it being outdoors.
RC, do you agree with Chris, or do you think that are you more on the Tampa side here?
I'm on the Tampa side. I'm starting to fall more into like with Tampa. Every day that goes by, I think Baker is going to be mostly fine for this game. With the grace of that it's going to be the Monday night game, so they're going to get an extra day out of it. I think the Eagles are trying to tell us, and they've been trying to tell us for the last 8, 9, 10 or more games this season that they're not a good football team anymore. And then if you take, I don't think A.J. Brown is going to play. You take A.J. Brown out with the team that's in a total collapse, and Tampa Bay, ascending may be too strong a word, but Tampa Bay is getting better as they go, or stabilizingly okay, good, and the Eagles are in a free fall. I mean, they got punched in the mouth by Arizona. The Giants should have beat them twice in the last 3 weeks, and then Arizona beat them. And I think they had Arizona down in that game, and Arizona just roared back and beat them. The Eagles have lost 5 out of the last 6. They're lucky that it's not 6 out of the last 6. They're lucky that they haven't lost 8 in a row since their bye. Their secondary has been obliterated with injuries and just lack of talent. Everything is going wrong for the Eagles. I don't have a case where I can back them. I'm not that in love with Tampa Bay, but it's just like the Eagles are maybe the biggest mess entering this playoff.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with anything there. For me, it's more the status of Baker Mayfield, but that extra day is advantageous. I did not consider that. But RC, we saw Rachaad White exit the game briefly against Carolina last week. Are you at all concerned about his injury in this one? Do you think he'll get a full workload here?
He wasn't even listed on the injury report today.
Okay.
So he got his arm hurt or something in game, and then took a series off and was back in the game. So unless I see something different, I'm gonna assume he's fine. Baker's only listed with an ankle injury, not a rib injury, on the injury report that I'm looking at. So I think he's gonna be fine enough. Same thing with Hurts. Hurts has got the issue with his finger, but he's gonna be able to tape that up and play. But no AJ Brown. I mean, that's a killer for a team that is totally falling apart.
Absolutely. If AJ Brown can't go here, that would totally make me. I mean, I'm already not comfortable betting the Eagles. Someone like AJ Brown missing could make me flip the other way. But I mean, one thing that's been really profitable just from a fantasy perspective, props, is attacking this Philadelphia secondary. And you have receivers in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin that can certainly do that and take advantage of Philly. If I see like full participation tomorrow and, no real concerns about his injury, that could be an interesting play, not only in like DFS pools, but just from a prop betting perspective, just getting Evans or Godwin in your lineup, or betting, looking at their props and seeing if you want to go over on anything there.
I started betting the Baker over passing game props ahead, figuring if you see a full practice, that number is probably going to jump. It's at 232.5 on DraftKings right now. I'll probably go more towards 250 plus. As soon as he's even limited practicing.
And they lost their rookie safety Sidney Brown last week too. So as if the Eagles weren't depleted enough in the secondary, they lost another pretty solid contributor there. So it's looking really good for the Tampa passing game. Again, my biggest question was the injury, but it's looking like I was overreacting to that. So it's good to sort of hear that. Chris, what are your thoughts here from a prop betting perspective?
Well, I mean, it makes sense. The Tampa Bay passing game makes sense. I just thought I would play it with Rachaad White, because I was thinking about, I watched the entire game when these two teams played in week 3. I was actually down in Tampa, and as I was out with some people watching it, and I know the teams have changed since then, but Jalen Hurts down there with the flu, and people betting money was coming in on Tampa Bay, and they just completely couldn't do anything on either side of the ball. It was really bad. Their passing game was nothing. Defensively, they were just. It was just such a lackluster effort. I know it was a long time ago, but it's just burned in my mind. And I wouldn't mind it if Tampa Bay won. I've spent the last month or 6 weeks like you guys have, really fading the Eagles and having good success with it. I just feel like they're a team with the pedigree they have. I could see them get going on the road here and getting a game, and optimism rising. And if that happens, I'll be ready to bet against them. But from a prop perspective, yeah, I think you'll probably if I get good numbers on Evans or Godwin, but the trouble there I think is which one do you go for? So that's where I feel like Rashad White 91.5. I think you're good no matter what the game state is there because you're capturing the running and the receiving.
It's a really good point, Chris. I like that. Okay. Anything else from this game? If not, let's start talking about some future bets, namely conference winner, Super Bowl winner. But closing thoughts on this, or are we good to go?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay.
I don't like it, but I'm good.
Yeah, I think that's how we all feel about this one, where no one seems to really have anything. No one really has a strong feeling either way on this one. So let's move to the future bets, guys. Let's start with the conference winners and Super Bowl winner. We'll start with the NFC. I'll go first. Not going to shock anybody here. I think the winner of the NFC is going to be the favorites, the San Francisco 49ers.
I'm not disputing it. It's about the only thing I have any confidence in.
Yeah, I think they're rightful favorites. And I'm really down on the other NFC teams. The Rams are a team that I'm, took a position in at big odds for the conference, but with the idea that if it gets down, I would hedge, to make some money on San Francisco, who's the team even from the beginning of the season I had as NFC champions. I had them playing Cincinnati in the Super Bowl and losing. But as far as the NFC went, I was really behind them the whole way, and they've really given me no reason. And the way it's shaken out, actually, the NFC is even softer than I thought it would be because the Eagles aren't the team that they, going into the season. There's no Eagles aren't as strong as we thought the Eagles would be, and no team emerged to be that strong.
Chris, that was my exact preseason pick, Cincy beating San Francisco, but obviously with Burrow gone, that went out the window. But it sounds like all of us are picking San Francisco to win the NFC. I think the one where we're going to have a lot more debate, and keep in mind, this isn't value. We're not talking about value betting. We're just making straight picks here. We'll give out futures as well that we like on, like who has nice Super Bowl odds, like maybe even Super Bowl MVP. But right now we're just straight picking the conference winners. On the AFC side, RC, do you want to go first on who you think is going to come out of that conference?
No, I want to go third.
Okay. Chris, you want to go first or you want me to?
Well, I think the AFC. I'm not. I don't really have I put the future bet in on the Browns, but that was more about what I could do with the ticket. I mean, I think the Browns. There's at least a path for them where there's not a path for every team. So I was looking for a way to fade the Ravens. I could see the Ravens getting there. I could see Buffalo getting there, but I'm more, indifferent in the AFC. There's a couple teams I could see, and that I say absolutely not to. I don't see Houston going all the way. I'm really down on Kansas City. So there's 4 teams that I just could see getting there, but nothing really gets me that excited. So if I had to, if I had to make a pick, I'd throw a dart.
Fair enough. I think for me, I'm looking to fade the Ravens too. I'm with you on that. So for me, the choice came down to 3 teams: Cleveland, KC, Buffalo, and I really can't trust Kansas City. I love their defense. I love Pacheco, but their offense, their passing attack, and I don't know if Mahomes is just gonna come out of this thing and just turn it on, and these receivers are going to just stop dropping the damn ball. Like, but for right now, as of today, I think I'm going Buffalo. I think Buffalo's coming out of the AFC. That would be my pick. I don't trust Lamar in a playoff game. Frankly, I think the Browns are going to win, and I think the Browns are going to knock the Ravens out and then lose to Buffalo in the AFC Championship. That's how I see the AFC playing out. RC, what about you?
I'm with you guys that I don't love any of these teams. I'm going with the Bills simply from the fact that the path to get there is the easiest of the non-Ravens, or maybe even including the Ravens. They, weather aside, drawing the Steelers in the first round is great. And then I think if everything else holds, they'll play Kansas City. If Kansas City wins their game against Miami, it'll be Buffalo, Kansas City, which I would love Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
So Buffalo has the easiest path. The Baltimore draws either the Browns or the Texans. I think it's a problem.
Yeah, the way it's set up now, if KC wins and Buffalo wins, because they're the 2 and 3 seed, they would play each other in the next round in Buffalo. And then obviously, like, you could have Buffalo have 3 straight home playoff games. Maybe they're not going to leave Orchard Park at all between the Steelers. They would obviously draw KC the next round, but if somehow the Browns or Texans upset the Ravens, then that game would also be in Buffalo. So I really like that path for them.
If we just did the AFC playoffs by best quarterback and just strictly went that route, I think we would then advance Josh Allen to the Super Bowl, as well as them having an easier path, I think. I mean, the Ravens technically have an easier path because they have a bye, but
right. But okay, now let's talk about the actual Super Bowl. Who do you guys have here? Are we all thinking that San Francisco is going to win this, or are you guys picking someone else to take it all?
Well, San Francisco is my pick to win the Super Bowl at this point, because my beloved Bengals are out of it. So, if it played out the way you guys were just describing, San Francisco against Buffalo, I would take the 49ers. I would think that, it depends on how the games go in the playoffs. But my guess is if it was San Francisco and Buffalo, you'd have San Fran favored by 2.5, something like that. And again, depending on how things go at this moment, I would think I would be liking San Francisco in that scenario.
Same here. I love San Francisco, especially against Buffalo in the AFC. So, yeah, I mean, again, Bengals, like Chris, my pick was Bengals over the Niners. Now that the Bengals aren't there, I think even Niners really impressed me this season too. I thought they were going to win, but they looked pretty good throughout the season. They obviously had that one nasty loss against Baltimore in December, but I think they're going to recover from that. They have a bye week. CMC's healing up. I think that we could see a nice run, and Kyle Shanahan finally gets a Super Bowl ring after 3 attempts as an OCN head coach, I believe. RC, what are you thinking?
We're also sure of the 49ers. That means it's not going to be them. So if it's not San Francisco, this is going to be a wild season for the Super Bowl. Because if it's not Baltimore, let's say that for grins, that if I told you from the future, hey, Baltimore and San Francisco don't make it to the Super Bowl, go have at it. Guess who made it? Who would you then say is in the Super Bowl?
I'll go first. On the NFC side, I would guess the Rams. on the AFC side, I'd stick to Buffalo. Because I don't think Baltimore is making it even out of that divisional round.
Well, I think that's what I was, as we kind of came to the conclusion together, that would be I would say Rams and Buffalo under the scenario where both of the 1 seeds got knocked out. And part of my case for betting the Rams was kind of what you alluded to, Andrew, is you've got a number 1 seed in San Francisco. I think both 1 seeds are vulnerable. The vulnerability of the Ravens is Lamar in the playoffs, and the idea that they said a couple of times this year that they were just the more physical team. Other teams that play basketball on grass, they were just going to be really physical with them. But in the playoffs, it's a different game. It's a physical game. So the Ravens kind of lose that edge that they had. And then in the NFC, clearly you've got Shanahan, who's been a great coach, but also gets ahead in the playoffs and blows big leads, So that's been kind of what he's dealt with in the past. And I think anytime you have that in your history, you can't help but think about it as you're going through a game. So I consider both of those 1 seeds vulnerable because they both seem to have an Achilles heel.
I could not have 2 Harbaugh family members winning championships in the same year.
Only 1 a year. You can't have both.
Yeah, my typical quota is 0, so it's definitely 1 is my maximum.
You've already exceeded it.
Did you guys know that Jim Harbaugh's dad also was on the coaching staff of Michigan? I think back in I don't think he was the head coach, but I think he was an assistant on that staff a while back. So it's scary how much Jim Harbaugh looks like his dad. If you age Jim Harbaugh 20 years, he'd look exactly like his dad.
Jim Harbaugh is he's turned it into Lou Holtz.
Do you guys think he's going to kind of give the middle finger to college football and come to the NFL, or do you think he's going to try to win more in Michigan?
I think he's going to the NFL, one of the West Coast teams. I don't know which, of the ones he's linked to. I think he goes to the NFL. I don't know why he would stay at Michigan.
Yeah, especially
now that he's won a title, there's no reason for him to put up with that crap anymore.
Yeah, I could see him being a good fit in Seattle or Los Angeles. That, my mind was originally the Chargers. I wasn't really thinking about Seattle originally until Chris said West Coast teams, but that makes sense. Okay, let's talk about Vegas. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's also talk about some longer Super Bowl odds or just playoff odds. Chris was alluding to Rams as the NFC winner, having some pretty nice odds. I really like the Rams as Super Bowl winners at 50-1. I think you can get that on FanDuel. That seems like a pretty good play. Seems a little mispriced in my opinion. So I like that play a lot. Anything else stick out to you guys?
And even a couple of weeks ago, that's the thing I think I put in my notes was start looking at some of these Super Bowl odds in week 16 and 17 because the Rams were 70-1, because they were 30 to 34-1 to win the conference. Usually it's about double. And then those prices really start dropping once you have the playoff field set. You could even have a team like the Browns who are locked into the playoffs and their odds are 16-1 to win the conference. And then the playoff field is set and, they're already locked into the 5 seed and they drop to 13-1, so that I think it's just that once you have the official playoff teams, the odds tick down. So that's going to be just something to put in the hip pocket for next year is when we're thinking about some of these long shot bets. You could even have the team locked in already. Just get them in because the odds are plummeting as the weeks go by here.
Yeah, it's a really good point. RC, anything that sticks out to you?
Kyron Williams, 65,000 to 1 MVP.
I like, you dropped one in the chat that I liked earlier. CMC 9 to 1. Obviously, it's not it's not as long as what you were just saying, but I think that one could definitely hit.
If you think the 49ers and the Rams are the two best teams left in these playoffs, then playing I propose the basket of Purdy, McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle, equal bet on every one of them to win the MVP, and that if just one of them did, you'd be profitable, except for Purdy. You'd only minor lose if Purdy came in, but if any of the other guys came in, you'd run a profit for your basket of MVP choices. But you could also throw Puka at 50,000 to 1 and Kyron at 65,000 to 1 and even Stafford at 6,000 to 1 and put them in there as lottery tickets. And you figure if the Rams or let's say, if you knew that the Rams or the 49ers were going to win the Super Bowl, I just listed off all of the highly probable MVP options.
Yeah.
You could play them all equally, and only if it was Purdy would you run a deficit. You'd run a profit with everybody else and a big profit on some of them. And then obviously if it was none of them, if it was a defensive wild card player come in, you'd lose it all. But
yeah, the last one I remember, I think the last defensive MVP, was it Malcolm Smith with Seattle?
I
the
think
Super Bowl.
so.
Yeah, so it's not really that. I mean, it's not impossible, but really, like, it's probably going to be one of the key offensive players that wins it.
No running back has won it in the last 20 years.
CMC could change that very easily.
That's what I say. I think CMC or Kyron, if the Rams were to get there.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because he gets the numbers, he typically gets the touchdowns. For them, he'll get multiple touchdowns in the game. That's usually what'll get you to the MVP, if it's not the quarterback.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good time to call it, unless you guys have anything else you want to share with the audience. But wanted to thank everybody for listening to this special episode where we broke down the wildcard games, provided our Super Bowl picks and some future odds. Please subscribe to the Bet the Close podcast on Spotify. Also check out ffmetrics.com, and also look up our my YouTube channel at AndrewDFS if you want more fantasy football content, betting content. That's it for Chris, RC, and myself. Please leave a comment, subscribe, and feedback is very much appreciated. Best of luck with your wildcard betting endeavors. I think we're good. Stop the recording now.